They were Sabbath keepers. They knew the truth about Christ and his righteousness. They were persecuted for their faith by the papal church. The Lord said unto Cain, this is how we can know the truth, that these souls were not literal souls in heaven doing something, because we have other places in the Bible where blood and things speak that really can't speak. That's right. The Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? And the Lord said, what hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth to me from the ground. An exact parallel. In the Bible, we find many symbolic statements about inanimate objects that cry out. The stone shall cry out of the wall, and the beam out of the timber shall answer it. It's symbolism. So we cannot take these verses to literally claim that it is the literal dead persons who are crying out for vengeance from God. Because, what does Ecclesiastes 9:5 say? The dead know nothing. Psalm 46:4 says the thoughts of the person perish in the day that he dies. So these cannot be literal souls, living people.
No, but the Lord sees and knows what's happened.
Oh, there's a record in heaven of everything that has happened.
And that's what he's going by.
Absolutely. The record in that record book in heaven is crying out before God for vengeance. But Paul says that we're not to take vengeance on ourselves, for ourselves. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. The martyrs are told that they must remain at rest for a short period or until the resurrection of the second coming of Christ. This is a key that tells us that they are not now in heaven. If they were, Christ would not have said, rest a little while longer. So the time period represented by the sixth seal began in 1755. Let's read those verses, 12 and 13 of chapter 6. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood, and the stars of heaven fell into the earth, as even a fig tree casteth her untimely figs when she is shaken by a mighty wind.
Wait. In the previous sheet that you handed out, it was 1798 to 1844, which is the time of the end.
Philadelphian Church.
Yeah, Philadelphia Church. That's the sixth seal.
So now the sixth seal is from 1755 to the second coming.
Well, I told you in that first chart that the times are arbitrary. They overlap. 1740, I picked that date at 1740 because that's when the First Great Awakening started. That was a movement that began to wake people up to the truth. But according to what we read here, if you want to start your date with the earthquake, that's 1755 with the Lisbon earthquake. So the times overlap. It's still during the Philadelphian time period. Yeah, there's no absolute date when one church ends and another church starts. This is prophecy.
Obvious.
It leads up to that time. It leads up to the end of the Philadelphian church and the beginning of the Laodicea church. And like I said earlier, it was God's intention that Laodicean church work was going to get over with very quickly. It was not God's intention that time should go on for 160 years. Okay, so during this great time period, we see the great earthquake that happened in 1755, and we talked about that last time, the vast extent that this earthquake was felt all over Europe, all the way into North America and Northern Africa. This was a tremendous earthquake. It was followed by the dark day and the moon of blood in 1780 and the falling stars in 1833. Let's read. Christ talked about this. Let's flip to Matthew 24.
Is there any significance to the earthquake happening on Sunday?
I think so.
All the people, because if you read the history books, all the people were in churches, especially in Lisbon.
Yeah, in those Spanish countries.
Spanish countries had already been so ingrained with Sunday keeping.
That's right. And it wasn't just any Sunday. It was All Saints' Day, when everybody was in church.
Right.
And if they hadn't been in those churches, they wouldn't have died, because they died because the buildings collapsed on them. It's just kind of interesting. Okay, let's read Matthew. Not on Sabbath. It happened on Sunday. That's right. Let's read Matthew 24, starting in verse 29. We'll just read 29 and verse 30. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. What was the tribulation? Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall, what? Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall. So what's the tribulation?
Well, we just talked about the people dying and all those, like the
Martyrs.
The martyrs, the persecution, that's right. The persecution that was suffered by the Christian church. That is the tribulation. It's not a future tribulation that's going to happen under some Antichrist power. Because the sun has already been darkened, the moon has already turned to blood, and the stars have already fallen.
Wasn't that the dark, tribulation pertained to the
Latter part of the Dark Ages.
right, where the Reformation was begun?
That's right. That's right. That's the tribulation period. It's not some future tribulation period, because if you put the Bible with the Bible, it explains itself. This verse, where Christ spoke these things, he is interpreting the prophecy in Revelation chapter 6.
Which verse is that in
Matthew
Matthew?
29 and 30. Chapter 24, verse 29 and 30. Verse 30 says, "And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, when all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory." And what does the next verse in Revelation say? "And the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places, and the kings of the earth, and great men, and rich men, and chief captains, and the mighty men, and every bondman, and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains, and said unto the mountains and rocks, Fall on us, and hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of his wrath is come. Who shall be able to stand?" Christ said, "Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, because they see the Son of Man coming in clouds." These two verses in Matthew 24 are parallel to what we read there in Revelation chapter 6. We're down to the seventh seal, but the seventh seal isn't talked about. You jump over chapter 7 before you find the seventh seal. The seventh seal is mentioned in chapter 8, verse 1, and there's a reason for that. Because the question, who is able to stand, must be answered. The seventh seal is the second coming of Christ. And that question, who is able to stand, must be dealt with first. That's part of the cleansing of the sanctuary. And next week, we will find out who they are in Revelation chapter 7.